Good morning, everyone. We are studying Mishna Harah. We are in Perek Gimel, Mishna Test, Chapter 3, Mishna 9. And I'd like to dedicate this morning's learning in memory of my mother, Mrs. Shlomis Rabinowitz, Shlomis Bas Rabbi Yaakov Eliezer. Kayetzabai. Similarly to the case that we had before, where we spoke about how a dough from sourdough from dough that challah wasn't separated from fell into dough that challah was separated from. Now we're going to talk about a similar kind of case when it comes to trumas and maasros. Kayetzabai. Similarly, zeisei masik shenes arvu imzeisei nikov. Basically, this means olives that one collects for themselves, means what a person collects to keep for himself, which would have an obligation to separate trumas and maasros from, that got mixed up with olives that are to go to the poor. There are certain olives that for instance, we're supposed to leave some olives on the tree for the poor to pick for themselves. If we forget to pick some olives, we have to leave them for the poor. And what happened at the end is that and those olives, there's no obligation to separate trumas and maasros from them. That's the halacha. What goes to the poor, there's no obligation to separate trumas and maasros from. So now we have a situation where we have olives that are obligated trumas and maasros, that trumas and maasros were not separated from, that became mixed with olives that don't have an obligation to separate from them trumas and maasros. Inve batzirim, inve oilolis. The same thing now with grapes. Grapes that you collect for yourself are grapes of oilolis. Oilolis are specifically clusters of grapes that have not developed normally. The Torah says you have to leave them for the poor. Well, the situation came that the two grapes became obligated. The grapes that mixed together. The grapes that are obligated in trumas and maasros got mixed together with the grapes of the poor that don't have an obligation of trumas and maasros. So how are we going to deal with this mixture? How are we going to deal with it? How are we going to correct the situation? The mixture is to the point that I can't identify one from the other. What am I going to do? If you basically have fruits of the same type that are tevel is the word that we use for untithed produce that trumas and maasros had not been taken out from. If he has the same type of fruit, other fruit that need trumas and maasros separated from them, then you can take out from those grapes according to the amount of grapes that got mixed in here. So, for instance, we're talking about the grape case. So you've got X percent of this mixture of grapes that are tevel and grapes that have no obligation for truma and maaser. There's a certain percentage of the grapes that need to be maasered within this mixture. So I have these other grapes that need trumas and maaser to be separated from, which I will separate from that tevel, from that untithed produce, for the amount of tevel produce that got mixed in here. That would be the best way to go. That would be the simplest way to go. V'im lav, but if not, maitzi truma trumas maaser min hakol. The Mishnah says you have to take out truma and trumas maaser from everything. V'hasha'ar maaser maaser v'hasha'ar maaser u'maaser sheni l'fi cheshbon, and the rest goes with maaser and maaser sheni according to the ratio. Okay, so just quickly review. A person has new grain for the year. It's been fully processed. You have an obligation to separate truma first, to take out truma first for the Kohen. From what's left, you take a tenth, you give it to the Levi. The Levi from that tenth takes a tenth of that tenth and gives it to the Kohen. After that, depending on the year, the second tithing of what's left will either be maaser sheni, which is produce that you have to take to Yerushalayim to eat there, or redeem it onto money that's eaten in Yerushalayim, or the second tithing will be maaser ani, a tithing that goes to the poor. Okay, so now you've got this grain, and it's tevel, or there's tevel mixed in here, right? We have the tevel grapes mixed into the chulin, meaning the non-tevel grapes, and we're trying to figure out how to fix this mixture. So the answer is, so now we're talking about if you don't have other tevel to separate from them for what got mixed in, what you have to do is like this. So let's speak it out. What you have to do is, you have to now basically separate everything from the entire mixture. That means I've got to separate truma as if the entire mixture is tevel, meaning really the ratio, there's only a certain amount of this mixture that is tevel, the rest of it isn't. But I have to treat it now like the whole thing is tevel, the whole thing is untithed produce, and I will separate according to that amount, the amount of truma that has to go to the Kohen. From what's left over, I will separate the meiser that goes to the Levi. I will separate from that meiser a tenth that goes to the Kohen. And now, regarding the meiser itself that goes to the Levi, and regarding the second meiser, whether it be to the poor or to be redeemed, when it comes to that, when it comes to what's left over, there's going to be a distinction how I treat it than how I treated the truma. I separated everything as if the whole thing is tevel. But at the end of the day, the truma that I separate, all of it goes to the Kohen. The trumas meiser that was separated, all of it goes to the Kohen. When it comes to the meiser and the meiser ani, the meiser sheni, there I will separate as if the whole thing is tevel, but what I actually give to the Levi or to the poor person, or what I treat as meiser sheni, will only be according to the proportion of how much of it is in there. So I'm going to give you the example that here in the notes they bring down just to work this out. For example, the mixture contains 600 tevel fruits and 400 chulin fruits. Okay, let's talk about the mixture after the truma was taken off of. You've got 1,000 fruits, 600 need trumas and meisers to be separated, 400 do not, because that was for the poor. When meiser rishon is being separated, the owner must separate 10% of the entire 1,000 fruit mixture, which is 100 fruits, as meiser rishon. Nevertheless, since only 600 fruits in the mixture are tevel, he gives the Levi only 60 of those fruits, because the 60%, that's really tevel. Similarly, when separating meiser ani or meiser sheni from the remaining 900 fruits, he separates 90 fruits, which he designates as meiser ani or meiser sheni. Yet, since only 60% of the fruits, which are 540, are tevel, meaning from what I'm separating now, he needs to take only 54 of those 90 fruits and give them to the poor if they are meiser ani, or redeem them if they are meiser sheni. He may keep the rest for himself. So I separate the meiser, but how much of the separation do I actually give to the Levi? According to the percentage of how much tevel was in here for meiser. And then after I separated what goes, and I'm separate now again from the leftover, which is 900 in this case, 60% of that is going to be 540. It's going to be from that 60% that I actually give the poor man, or that I actually have to treat as meiser sheni. The rest of it, I can treat it like regular. So when it comes to what I so again, to start off with, I have to separate for everything that I'm separating. I have to separate from the entire mixture, the whole mixture, the fruits, whether the mixture of the chulin and the tevel fruits, I separate enough truma and meiser ani or meiser sheni as if the whole thing was tevel. That's how much I have to separate. But when it comes to actually what do I give away, there'll be a distinction between the truma and the meiser. Distinction. I have to separate from the whole thing because I have to make sure that I've separated enough that would cover the amount of meiser of tevel that's really in this mixture. But at the end of the day, when it comes to what I have to give, it's going to be different. And the reason is as follows. Truma is not allowed to be eaten by a non-Kohen. Trumas meiser may not be eaten by a non-Kohen. Meiser that goes to a Levi, meiser that goes to the poor. If you're not poor, the poor man can give it to you if he wants to. He can feed it to you. He can sell it to you. A Levi can give you his meiser rishon. He could sell it to you. So you're not forbidden from taking from it. Meiser sheni, we know you can redeem it. You can redeem it even if it's not in front of you. It can be far away. You can redeem it. So the point is like this. So now, if I go ahead, I separated, I went ahead and I separated, let's just start off. I separated from the whole amount, I separated Truma. Separated Truma, 1/50th, whatever it may be. I separated that. Now, if I just go ahead and give you Truma based on the ratio of Tevel that's in here, that's what I'm going to give the Kohen. So the problem is that within that amount, you don't know if there may be non-Truma in there. And that means if there's there may be non-Truma fruits in there that you're giving to the Kohen, which means that there's still Truma left by you. You can't eat that. You can't eat that. Not allowed to eat that. It's Truma, or maybe Truma. So when I separate from Truma, I really don't have a solution for it. If I just give according to the ratio, I may still be leaving behind Truma in the rest of the pile, and I can't eat that. So at the end, when it comes to the Truma, I got to give it all away. Now, I only have to give away for free, so to speak, according to the percentage of Tevel that's in there. The rest, I can say to the Kohen, look, I can't eat it, but I don't have to give it to you for free. Nobody knows if it's yours or not. So he'll sell it to him. And then at the end of the day, the Kohen can eat it all. It's a mixture. It's meduma, as we've had before. But when you're talking about the meiser, if I go ahead, I separate meiser, I have to separate a certain amount to make sure I've covered the meiser. But now I can give you from that meiser according to the proportion of tevel that's in there. Maybe some of the meiser is going to be left by you. Who cares? You're allowed to eat it. And at the end of the day, you're giving the amount to the Levi that he deserves. So you've separated what you needed to separate, and you're giving the Levi to cover everything. You're giving the Levi what he's supposed to get percentage-wise according to the truth, because only part of this was tevel. And in case what was separated as meiser lands up by you, not a problem. You're allowed to eat it. And you gave him what he should be getting anyway, so it's not a problem. The same thing regarding the second tithing if it's meiser ani. If it comes out that if you give the meiser ani according to the proportion of how much tevel is in here, he got what he's supposed to get. Maybe some of the fruit that was actually separated from meiser ani stays by you. It's not a problem. You're allowed to eat it. And when it comes to meiser sheni, I could also redeem it according to the proportion, because when it comes to meiser sheni, I don't have to be able to identify the meiser sheni to redeem it. It can be thousands of miles away from me, and I can redeem it. And therefore, redeem it according to proportion, and everything's fine. The money, according to how much tevel was in there, has the sanctity of meiser sheni. The fruit that's in there, the sanctity is off, and everything's fine. Therefore, that's what the Mishnah means when it says that if you don't have other tevel to separate for what got mixed in, then maitzi truma trumas meiser lakol. You separate the truma the meiser for everything, meaning for the entire pile of it, it's tevel. And actually, it's not just that you're going to separate for the entire pile. You're going to do the same thing for the meiseris, for the tithings. Sha'ar, and what's left over, meaning after you've separated the truma and the trumas meiser and given that all to the Kohen, the rest of it is meiser and meiser sheni according to the ratio, not in the separating, but in what you go ahead and give away. What you give away from the truma is the whole separation goes to the Kohen, because it's meduma, you can't eat it. While when it comes to what's left over for meiser rishon and meiser sheni, that you actually give according to the ratio according to the proportion of tevel that got mixed into this, that got mixed in here. Okay, we are now in the laws of Lashon Harah, Klal Yud, chapter 10 from the Chavetz Chaim, Sif Zayin, paragraph 7. We're going to go back and explain one of the 7 conditions mentioned before to be able to tell others about the wrong that somebody did to somebody else that you know of. You have to first go and rebuke him. Before you tell others about what he did, and you're telling others for a constructive purpose, you should speak to him first and privately get him to straighten out. So that's one of the conditions. Before you go telling others, you have to rebuke him. If he doesn't listen, then you move on to others. That condition is hainu dafka bistama. That's only on a without knowing otherwise. He's a fellow Jew. He did something wrong. You're gonna rebuke him. Okay. But if you know this person and you know that your words will not help to stop him from doing what he did, and he won't accept your rebuke, he won't take your rebuke to return what he stole. You don't need to rebuke him then. However, now when you go and tell others about it, you should do it in front of 3 people. Time, and the reason is, if you only tell it over to 1 or 2 people, it'll look like you want to make sure that the person who did wrong, you're trying to make sure he doesn't hear about it. On the outside, you want to look like you're okay with him, and behind his back, you're putting him down. And by doing so, it looks like you're just trying to have some kind of personal benefit from speaking against somebody else. Another reason, or the people you tell it to, they won't believe you. Because otherwise, why don't you go over to him first? The imkain, meaning, why are you coming to us right away? Why don't you speak to him first? Therefore, they're going to cast doubt on what you tell them. That's why the imkain, the other misipur, shum toyelis. Otherwise, and then there's not going to be anything gained from what you're telling. Therefore, you need to publicly say this. What does publicly mean? In front of 3. If that's as it, you send it to his face. Why? Because it's going to, when you tell something to 3 people, then you can assume, as we have mentioned, we had learned a long time ago, in front of 3, it's going to get spread. And therefore, number 1, you're not going to look like you're not trying to backstab him. And number 2, they're not going to suspect you because they understand in front of 3 people is like doing it publicly. And if you're saying something public, you're probably not telling something false. Even though the people hearing this from you, they cannot accept it as certain. That's not because they consider what you're saying as untrue. It could be that maybe there's one detail that's missing that could change the story. Therefore, they cannot accept it as certain that this person did something wrong. Nonetheless, they should listen to what was said regarding they should investigate if it's true, and to rebuke the person that was spoken about, that you're telling them about, and maybe he'll listen. Or other benefits that come. So the point is that if you're not going to rebuke this person because you don't have to, you have to make sure that it doesn't look like you're trying to hide it from him, what you're saying about him, or that you're going to be suspect of not telling the truth, because why don't you approach him first? Therefore, if you send it in front of 3 people, which is as if you got up in public and said it, because it's going to get out. So number 1, it doesn't look like you're trying to backstab the guy who you're speaking about. Number 2, they're going to say, look, if he's going public, then it's a good chance he's not lying. Now, from the laws, from the point of Kabbalah's Lashon Harah, from the point of the laws of not accepting Lashon Harah, not accepting something that you hear, these people who hear from one person, they cannot believe him. Not because he's lying, but maybe there's a detail that's missing. Nonetheless, maybe a detail that's missing, but it doesn't mean that we ignore it. We have to consider it, and we have to move on into our own investigation to see if it's true, and therefore then go on to either gain from it in the sense of learning not to copy that kind of behavior, or to go and actually help the person out that was wronged. So therefore, if The first day, so the way it works is you're supposed to go with, before you're going to tell other people what this person did to someone else, you have to go and rebuke him yourself. If he doesn't listen, you move on. If you know this person will not listen to you, meaning your rebuke won't help, then you don't have to rebuke him. But you'll have to then, when spreading it, say it in front of 3 people so as not to be suspect of either backstabbing him or not telling the truth. Have a wonderful day.